Fog curled off Lake Michigan the morning the carriage rattled through the iron gates and the mansion became a convent. Bells were hoisted into the tower, the limestone corridors swept, the chapel scrubbed to a pale sheen, and the women in black filed through the arch as if they were crossing a threshold that would never let them back. Mother Catherine moved among them like a blade, tall, unblinking, voice even as a metronome. To strangers she looked like certainty dressed in wool. To the young she felt like safety because no other kind had yet been offered. They worked until their hands split. Winters of thin soup and wool blankets stiff with old soap. 7 prayers a day, the chapel stones so cold they taught a body where every bone lived. Sister Elizabeth gathered orphans with a smile that made men at the gate relax. Sister Margaret learned the names of every root and tincture and the exact amount of laudanum that would quiet a fever or a voice. The neighbors stopped muttering papists and started sending coughs, fractures, infants. Charity is an excellent mask when it's worn by women who never look away. The first absence arrived like a smudge in morning light. Sister Agnes did not take her place at matins. An empty space is louder than any sound in a cloister. At breakfast, Mother Catherine announced a call to a frontier mission, the kind that claims urgency and leaves no time for goodbyes. Trunks had not been seen, letters had not been written, yet Agnes was on the road before dawn. A murmur rose, then died under those pale eyes. A week passed, then 2. Her cloak still hung on its peg. Departures began to multiply. Sister Bernardet requested for a foundling home in Chicago. Sister Catherine, contemplative retreat in Montreal. A rhythm formed. An absence, a tidy story. A cell swiftly cleared. What prayer could not explain, penance would. Kneeling on dried peas until the knees bled was called discipline. Silence was called holiness. Fear, if named at all, was called the devil's test. In the laundry's steam, in the herb garden behind the fence, in the narrow dormitory where cots were a hand's breadth apart, whispers found each other and then flinched from the sound of their own courage. Sister Mary Collins kept the smallest of rebellions, a sharp memory. She counted faces. She remembered laughter. She noted cloaks that did not leave pegs. One night she woke to footsteps and a breathless, stifled sound from the adjoining cell. A command in a low voice, "You will come now." A soft scuffle like someone being dragged rather than led. In the morning, another mission, another smile, another place set aside in the refectory, as if it had never been there at all. Fear has a way of concentrating the mind. On a market morning when she was permitted to carry the egg basket beyond the wall, Mary slid a folded scrap into a milk-boy's pocket and a tiny silver cross into his palm. "Deliver this to Father Thomas at St. Joseph's. Tell no one." The boy nodded with the solemnity of children who suddenly understand the world is real and dangerous. Father Thomas read the note 3 times. He had thought of the convent as admirable severity, not a question. But he had counted faces too. When he brought his concerns to the bishop in Milwaukee, he met velvet disapproval and the softest kind of threat. Do not damage the church with rumor. He left with the sense that the floor inclined toward silence. Authority ignored breeds a different kind of obedience. He wrote to Archbishop Hughes in New York, the sort of letter that can't be unread once it arrives. A month later, a carriage bearing a Monsignor's seal rolled unannounced through the convent gates. Paper burned in the kitchen stove despite the warmth of the day. Nuns carried armfuls of ledgers toward heat. Mother Catherine received the visitors with the brittle smile of a window about to crack. "We must see all of it," said Monsignor Kelly, holding the Archbishop's letter like a key. Even the north wing. That corridor had always been a rumor to men. Doors heavy as confessionals, locks bright from frequent hands. Behind one, a sound like a breath torn in half. The key turned. Darkness gave up 5 figures. Women with faces sharpened by hunger, habits soiled and torn, bodies that flinched instinctively from light. The smell was the ancient smell of neglect. One woman stood with the stubborn dignity of the nearly broken. "Father," she rasped. "He came. They prepare us for the doctor." For Chicago, men pay more for brides of Christ. Elsewhere, the inspectors found the anatomy of the crime arranged as tidily as a ledger: laudanum, chloroform, calipers, a physician's scrawl in a thin book, Dr. W. Matthews, notations of cycles and suitability, account books that called human beings, commissions, packages, premium placements, letters to houses of charity where nothing charitable transpired. In Sister Margaret's hand, a clinical hand, were dosages and outcomes. In Sister Elizabeth's, sums married to names. One line read, Sister Teresa Donovan, unsuitable for transfer due to resistance. Terminated, no commission. Names gathered like storm clouds: Agnes, Bernadette, Josephine, Rebecca. Some were alive behind the locked door. Others were found beneath the herb beds where rosemary and beans grow well in loosened soil. Earth gives back what it can. The bodies testified to strangulation. The rosary found in one shallow grave still held a saint's small face pressed to bone. The convent closed in a day. Guards at the gate. The sisters in the locked room fed, wrapped in blankets that smelled of smoke and starch. Mother Catherine watched it all with a silence that felt like contempt. Sister Margaret with a thin smile that suggested you will never understand the size of the room you've entered. Sister Elizabeth with the tremor of someone whose mind saw too much and then went dark to save itself. Before the civil warrants arrived, 2 cells stood open and empty, windows latched from the inside. The old mansion had been a lumber baron's once. Such houses grow secret stairs the way trees grow rings. By morning, only Elizabeth remained, kneeling, lips moving. She would never speak again. Justice is a clock with missing gears. Callahan, the hired fist, was hanged after shooting a policeman, and on the night before the rope he muttered about the master and snakes that change their skins. The doctor slipped through a door money always seems to open. The ledgers moved like contraband light, some seized, some burned, some disappearing into drawers where church seals keep secrets quiet. The bishop was sent across an ocean to pray in a place where no one asked questions out loud. The surviving nuns were parceled out to distant houses with papers to sign and names they should not speak. Sister Josephine gave birth to a daughter and was told the child must be placed with a good Catholic family far away. Grief turned inward and did not spare her. Sister Rebecca, who had said the word doctor like a curse, took a different road. She left her veil and published an account under another name, and it was denounced as fiction and hunted from shelves and still survived in the cracks of memory. Father Thomas was thanked, then exiled to a parish near the edge of the map. In his journal he wrote names until the page looked like a vigil. Rumor swelled and was tamped down. Raids in Chicago lifted a few women from rooms where the wallpaper was tired and the windows curtained in daylight. But the ledgers naming judges and bankers and legislators went missing, and witnesses recanted in voices that looked over their shoulders. Monsignor Kelly, who had opened the door, was beaten in a city where he had no enemies and quickly recalled. Letters later unsealed said what men rarely write. I believe this is only the part we can see. Years passed. Someone dug a garden in Mexico and found bones. An abandoned house in Veracruz yielded 2 women seated across a small tea service, the cups laced with poison and the room stuffed with money, forged names, and a locket painted with a convent that no longer stood. He comes tonight, read the last entry in a thin book beside them, and scholars argued about whether he was a man or an idea or simply a fear that had learned to write. The church built a new orphanage with the money from the sale of land and kept its sentences short. The field where the herb beds once grew became surveyed lots, and later, cul-de-sacs with names meant to soothe: Meadow Court, Chapel Lane. Builders turned up a tin box with a rosary, a folded veil, and a list of 23 names under 2 words, Remember Us, and someone at the county office filed it into a cabinet that sticks when it rains. On certain nights the wind carries sound oddly over the flats, and people say you can hear chanting like a river heard through walls, or crying you cannot locate. But memory does not need voices to be true. It needs a boy brave enough to take a note, a priest stubborn enough to write a letter when told not to, A woman who slid a scrap into a pocket and paid with silver, and then with her life. It needs a book page hidden in a mattress and a rosary pressed into clay, and a ledger that calls a crime by the wrong name so clearly that the error becomes evidence. If you gather the pieces, you do not get a neat story. You get a corridor, a key turning, 5 women blinking like animals pulled from a burrow. You get dirt under fingernails from a grave too near the beans. You get a convent that looked like piety from the road and worked like a market in the dark. And then you get the long, ordinary silence of institutions mending their curtains, while the women who live the night go on living the day.